Hey guys, today's story is about a voluptuous wizardess. I arrived at the game store with my friend who had never played an RPG before, but wanted to give it a try. There were several games going on in a cramped space, and it was very loud. This made it hard to hear what was going on, but I pushed through. I was ready for an adventure. I was ready to show my friend the wonders of role-playing. I was ready for some 3-5. The DM set the scene. We looked over the battlefield of the greatest war this land had ever seen. But the war was over, and the battlefield was strewn with bodies, which have already been picked through. Even the lowest of the scavengers no longer entered this vast, desolate space. Nothing of value remained. We adventurers of varied backgrounds, a wizard, rogue, barbarian, and my own druid, a seeker of enlightenment, had gathered together for one great noble purpose: to search the battlefield for whatever scrap metal was left, after months of looting. Fortunately, we had a valuable asset on our side. Not the rogue, trained to be an expert spotter. Not the barbarian, who, with their great strength, could haul massive amounts of metal. But the wizard. Yes. This improbably proportioned wizardess, as long as she could maintain her balance against the weight of her gargantuan bosom, was the world's foremost master of a magic spell of immense power. One that could guarantee a roll of exactly 10 on any attempt to search for treasure. The rogue's superior skill was no match for the power of the 10, and she had the foresight to prepare no spell but this. For what other magic would matter? Our master of the arcane took control of the situation immediately, commanding us to gather the rotting corpses of dead soldiers into a pile. And while we did so, she generously explained to us how her most perfect of spells would function. She elaborated and embellished upon the wisdom that led her to prepare the spell, and only this. When we were ready, our wizardess explained again to us, her most feeble-minded allies, how her great feat of magic would work. She then raised her hands to the heavens and shouted out the words of power she had spent years mastering. And lo, 2 copper coins and a fragment of a broken helmet glowed from within the pile. We praised the power of 10 and gathered the items, while she expounded once again on the functioning of her spell and her wisdom in selecting it. With this great and noble task complete, we looked to our silent DM, and then to our wizardess who, through her unfathomable understanding of the deep workings of the universe, knew precisely what we should do next. Once again, she commanded us to gather the bodies, and once again, she explained the power of her magic 3 times, and once again, she raised her hands to the heavens and revealed our couple of coins. We performed this ritual again and again, accumulating nearly a silver coin in wealth. Then, all of a sudden, we were assaulted by a creature who was living amongst the bloated corpses of the battlefield. A horror of a walking plant, living where no plants lived, who threatened our very survival. We looked to our powerful and wise wizardess for guidance. For guidance was all she could give without any magic available to her but the power of 10, and guidance she did give. She opened her 2-strapped sack and brought forth a pile of tomes, the likes of which we had never seen. My weak druidic magic was nothing compared to the immense power I could have gleaned from these tomes, and with great care and much verbiage, she taught me that again and again. As I called upon the spirits to entreat them for magical aid, she held her tomes before me and explained to me what other spirits could do, and what powers I could have called upon had I had access to her tomes. And with the aid of the spirits, and the strength of my friend the barbarian, and the skill of the rogue, we soon vanquished this vile plant, and were able to continue with our true purpose. And the wizard once again described her spell. But all of this has been a dramatization. But it's fairly accurate. Other than the amount of money that we collected, which was closer to a couple of gold pieces worth, the wizard's player, if it wasn't obvious, based on the description of the character's breasts, was male. And breasts were all his character had. There was no further description or role-playing from him. Over the course of the 4-hour session, he probably described that spell at least 40 times, bragging each time about how useful it was and how smart he was to have prepared it in all of his spell slots. I wasn't exaggerating when I said that he explained it 3 times every time he used it. Other than the very brief and random encounter, we literally did nothing but gather corpses and wait for the player to describe, then cast and describe his spell some more, his rather ineffective spell. Because wizards in 3.5 are not typically great at searching, and taking 10 on the check just reduced the chance that we would find anything worthwhile. The only other things that he did were criticize what the rest of us were doing, and shove random supplemental books in my face to tell me what spells I should have prepared. His only interest in the game was strategy, and his grasp of strategy was very poor. The game included roughly 3 minutes of roleplaying, and that included the description of the wizard's glorious bosom. One might ask why we listened to this crazy player for 4 hours, and I don't really know. I think it was because we were a bunch of socially awkward nerds, and he was very, very loud, very demanding, and wouldn't take no for an answer, and wouldn't even acknowledge that an answer had been given. And a little silly side note. During the very brief and very random encounter, my character was knocked to 0 HP and had to stabilize. In 3.5, this is a 10% chance, so I took out my D10 and rolled it, and I got a 1, and I figured that I had succeeded. The DM told me to roll a second die, seeing as he was a full-grown adult who presumably graduated from elementary school. I very briefly tried to explain how a 1 in 10 chance was the same as a 10 in 100 chance, but it went over his head. And he was getting a bit too upset over it, and it absolutely was not worth fighting about, so I just rolled the second die. Other than that silly little suspicion of cheating, the DM was a very reasonable person, but extraordinarily dull. After the game, I went home and emailed the DM, telling him politely that his game wasn't for me. I suggested an interesting way to have my character sneak off into the night and continue on his search for enlightenment, leaving a memento for the rogue, the one player who did meekly attempt to roleplay a little. The DM was just annoyed that I was leaving and demanded an explanation, and I tried to continue to be polite. But in any case guys, that's the end of the story. If you liked it and would like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for future videos. But, as always, have a good one.